Ladies and gentlemen, I introduce Samuel Suh. Well, could you kind of give a short introduction about who you are?
Um, so I was born in New York. My parents immigrated to America for various reasons. My dad came for business. My mom was a nurse, and then they met in the States, and then they ended up getting married, and they moved to New York. And then they had my sister, and then me. And so I was born in New York. We were not rich at all, so we kind of went progressively because there's New York City and then there's suburbs of New York City. So we went progressively from the worst neighborhoods in New York City, kind of the super sketchy kind of hood areas, and then we progressively kept moving into nicer areas. And so by the time I was in high school, we were in a pretty nice area of New York State called Westchester County. In a town called Scarsdale, which is known by some people around the States. That's where a bunch of people in New York City go to live with their families. So it's kind of a nice place. And so after graduating from high school, I went to college in Boston at Northeastern University. And there I started out as a computer science major. And I did that for a couple of years before I got tired of being in literally a room with no windows and all you see are dudes. And I was like, there's so many.
That's exactly the studio right now.
Basically, but Anyway, so I ended up switching into business. So I ended up going into business management and marketing because my dad runs a supermarket, basically, like a big supermarket. And so I had always been in kind of the work your own business kind of ecosystem, right? So he was always doing something, and then he got into real estate stuff, and then so he was always that entrepreneurially minded guy, and so I took that as my model person to go after, and then I ended up going into business management, and I did my college is a little weird. So my college, normally in the States, it's a 4-year college, but my school is a 5-year college. And the reason it's a 5-year college is because they force you to go get a job, 2 blocks of 6-month internships. And so you would go in semester. We have semesters in the States where it's half a year. So you do your normal few semesters, and then after 3 semesters, you're forced to go get a job. You must go work somewhere for 6 months. That is part of your school schedule. So it's school, work, or however you want to do it. So you have to do 2 internships. These are full-on internships. They're paid internships, and the school will help you get that internship, and they'll hook you up with a nice job or wherever, because they have basically roots and connections in all of Boston, because they know that they have to place thousands of kids every year. And so all the companies are yeah, we know you, so just send us your good ones. And so I ended up doing an internship. My first one was at the National Park Service, which is the governmental organization in the States that takes care of national parks. So I was in the Northeast headquarters, and that was my first job ever, in an office. And I was like, is this what work is?
Yeah.
And then
how was it? Yeah.
It was I don't want to say anything bad about the job, but it's you can tell it's a government job. And so people are there, they had seniority, they've been there for 30 years. I think someone was there for 50 years. And so it's very different than a startup environment where you kind of are forced to move. You have to do stuff or else you die. But in a different scenario, in the government sector, it's the opposite, where they're just we're fine. We're gonna get almost the bare minimum. Not really, but they were good. But the mentality is different. It's more towards let's just do what we have to do, and then we'll move on, and then we'll come back tomorrow and do the same thing over again. And so that was a little interesting to see, because as I mentioned, we come from a hustle culture where it's you have to go grind and you have to go make your money. But anyway, so that was really interesting. And then the second one was in a corporate environment. So that was my first office job. The National Park Service one was technically an office job, but it was really chill and everyone was super nice. But my second internship was at a financial institution called John Hancock. And so, which then got bought out by a Canadian company called Manulife. So they're an insurance company. But that was really interesting because it was like a straight up like corporate actual working in an office, like in a big tower. Like the John Hancock Tower in Boston was like the biggest tower. And so like I would go to work like there, and it was really weird and like interesting. Like, and I kind of knew going into it that like I don't think I fit in this culture. But that internship was like confirmation. It's like I don't really fit in this culture. And again, it's a little bit more like you have your role in like you're the cog in the machine, and your role as this cog is to do a certain job. And I was like, yeah, but what about like everything else that goes into it? Like I could do this. Like my role is like data analysis, and then I had to generate a report. But it was like really like disheartening because my report, like no one looked at it. Like no one cared about this report. So I would spend like a month working on this report. I would like give it to my boss, and he'd be like, good job. And then like he'd like send it to his whoever he needs to send it to. And then I was like, all right, well, what now? And they're like, yeah, they do something with it maybe, or they like save it somewhere or whatever. And I was like, all right, that's cool. What do I do next? And he's like, do the same report again. And I was like, okay,
did that for 50 years?
Yeah. I was like, is this what life is? Like, is this what corporate jobs are? And it was cool. I loved everyone I've worked with so far. Like in the National Park Service, they were all great. My boss was great. Like my coworkers were great. In like the second one too, like everyone was wonderful. But like there's always something in the back of my mind, like this isn't what I want to do. Like this isn't like the lifestyle I want to be leading. Like I'm sure it's like super secure because like actually it wasn't that secure because John Hancock at the time I was interning there, they literally got bought by that other company, and they were doing like a transition. So like the floor that I was working on was like half empty, and this was back in the day, like 2000. I don't remember, like early 2000s, like before 2010. It was like 2004, 5, 6, something like that. And so, yeah, like at that time, I was like you guys are doing this, and it's not even like a secure job because like the government job was like super secure. Like you're not going to get fired from that job unless you mess up like really, really bad. But this one was like people were getting laid off, and it was not a great environment to be in. And I was like, yeah, sure. Like I get it. People do what they can. But I knew from then it was like pretty solid. It's like I should go do something startup-y. And so like I kept going that way. And then luckily one of the courses I took in my last semester of undergrad was a business law class. And that kind of led me into thinking I really understand this law stuff. Like it's like very logical coming from programming. It's like very logical, right? Yeah. And law was also very logical. It was like, these are the rules. This is what the rule means. Like this is what the wording means. So it's like syntax, right? So it's just like, I was like, oh, so there's like, programming is like code logic, and then law is like society logic. And to me, that made it very like easy to kind of jump between the two of those. And so after like a break, I ended up going to law school back in New York, and then I passed the bar, and then that's a whole other story. But like law school was the worst time of my life. Like I hated it so much. It was not fun. It was not very productive, and it was like just pure pain. So I hated my whole law school experience for the most part. But I do think I learned a lot, and like I learned, I would say my logic is more solid now. Like they've like sharpened me. My logic is like a sharpened knife now. So like it's very like it can cut. But yeah, it wasn't fun. And so after that, I'm gonna skip a little bit of time, and then I moved out to California in 2014. I went to like the Bay Area, so I was in East Bay in a place called Emeryville, which is like next to Oakland and next to Berkeley. And then I basically did startup stuff. Like I tried a bunch of stuff. I did a lot of like learning. I tried a bunch of stuff that didn't work. And so I would say like 2014 to like 2015, 16, I was like not doing that great because I was just learning. I was like, this is a mistake, all right, well now let me try it this way, and then that's not working. And so I tried a bunch of stuff. I feel like I learned a lot there as well, but it like wasn't working. Like I wasn't getting traction, and so I kept pivoting to like try other stuff. And so after a little bit of time doing that, I was like, man, like I should maybe go like refresh my like fundamental skills. So because it's been so long since I was doing like computer science and stuff, and the Bay Area is very like tech oriented, I was like, maybe I should go like refresh my tech knowledge. And so I ended up going to a boot camp for data analytics, which was fun. It wasn't super productive. It got me like core fundamental skills again, which I hadn't used in a long time. But I knew that wasn't gonna like do it for me. Like it wasn't enough, right? So you learn, and then you're like, I know the basics now, but then I don't know how to be like applying this to like a real world situation. Long story short, I ended up taking another boot camp, but for web development, and this was back in like 2016. And so I ended up doing like a full stack web development boot camp. But then that's when I met a bunch of cool people, and that's when I learned about cryptocurrencies. And so I kind of jumped into the world of cryptocurrencies for a long time, but from a very like I would say like a unique perspective, because a lot of people in the crypto scene are like kind of like the degen crowd, right? Like they're like the YOLO, just ape into random coins kind of stuff. But I came from like a very like technical side. I was learning the tech. I was learning like cryptography. I was learning like elliptical curve cryptography and like how private keys work and like the actual like fundamental side. And so that's where I ended up meeting a bunch of people, and we ended up like getting pretty deep into the tech, because the tech is very interesting as well. Like I know you're a technical person, so like it's like if you and all of your friends and everyone your friends hang out with, if everyone just really got into like a specific code base for some reason, and you're that's all you talk about every time you meet up, and everyone's like kind of getting into it, and people are like making lots of money from it, and people are building like real companies from it, because that's where like Coinbase was from. Like that era is where Coinbase started. That era is like kind of like the follow up to where like Ethereum started, because Ethereum was like 2013 was their ICO. And then like, but you know, that took a little bit of time, and then it took a little bit of time to kind of ramp up. So around that time, because I first got introduced to Bitcoin in like 2014, so it was like right around that time, and then 2016 is when I got really like into the tech side of things, and so that was my life for a few years. Where in the San Francisco crypto scene, there's always something to do. There's like meetups like every couple days, and like it's like not like 5-person meetups. It's like 50 to like 300-person meetups, and that's like every week at least, and so. And like it's like really like top tier people that are coming on and talking about stuff, like all like a lot of people that seem like way out there now, they were just like random dudes at a meetup before, and so I think we kind of got spoiled. I was talking about this with another friend. It's like we were spoiled with like the amount of like high quality people that we were running into on like a regular basis, and so. Because some of the people from like the meetups are the ones that are starting like multi-billion-dollar like projects, and like some of them worked, some of them didn't, but like everyone was like super like it was a very like I guess like a pivotal moment, like a what is that called, where everything just kind of like explodes in like one Cambrian explosion, right? Where like everyone kind of like comes together, and there's like so much like happening in like a small space, like small amount of time, and then like some things just kind of like explode out. And so that was a really interesting time to be in San Francisco. Like Solana started around there. I interviewed Anatoly for a little bit, which is the founder of Solana, and then a couple of other like major projects came out of that space. Anyway, so like everyone I knew at the time was either starting a project or working on like a massive project, or like they were on like the funding side. So I was running into like a bunch of friends who were starting funds, so it was super fun actually. Like I do miss those times because it like especially now in Korea, I think it's both like the market has kind of cooled down, but also like Korea is very different in like the way they approach community. So it's not like an open community usually. It's more like a closed off community. But anyway, so after that, I started my own startup with a friend, two friends, and so we built a decentralized cloud storage startup based off of this improvement that one of them had in erasure encoding technologies. So we came up with a new algorithm that makes erasure encoding better. I can break that down for you if you want, but basically it was a new way to process data to store it across a distributed network. So that's like the simple way to put it. But it was like a technological innovation that enabled like a better technical implementation. And so that's what we built the startup around. We raised a little bit over $2 million for the seed round. And then we hired a bunch of people. We got an office space and we started just to build it out. And that was mainly because one of the investors was like a major investor. They basically put in like $1 million like by themselves. And then like a bunch of other people came in and put in the rest. So it was like 1.1 million from, I think it was like 8 or 9 entities, different people, and then like one like major stakeholder. Yeah. And so like the power balance there is a little bit weird because like these people are giving you like hundreds of thousands of dollars, but this guy gave you $1 million. So you kind of have to like skew your product and you're kind of like pandering towards like that major shareholder. Because they're like the big one that you have to take care of first, and then everyone else like kind of understands where you have to be like they put in 10 times as much money as you, so we're just gonna like handle them first. And that was part of the deal. It was written into the contract. It's like we do their thing first.
And how did that feel? Like when you got the contract signed,
got that? At the time, like we were super stoked to like close the round and stuff, but like at the time, it was just like another step. Like it was like yeah, we needed to like get the money, but like it was like part of like a bigger thing. It's like we needed to finish the round. Like we were like, come on, like let's end the round, and so we can actually get to work. Because when you're fundraising, you kind of have to like fundraise. Like you have to like primarily like switch gears into fundraising mode, and you're not actually working on the main thing. Like you're not working on your product because like for us, it was like a starter team, right? It was 3 people, and so we were just full-time fundraising for like a few months. And so we had no progress basically, except for the stuff that we needed to build out for the fundraising. So like we were like optimizing like a little like prototype, and then which we had before. And then we were like making pitch decks and whatever and all of that. And so, but like we're doing that on the fly really, where they're like, yeah, like show us like how your algorithm works. And we're like, okay. And so like we would have to like go and like put that into like a document and like kind of make it understandable. And then we had to deal with like a bunch of like operational stuff, like legal entity building, and then like NDAs for some of the stuff, and then like we had to figure out like the patent process because we were like patenting that algorithm. You can't patent an algorithm; like we're patenting the architecture of the product we were building. Anyway, so we did that for a little bit. We closed around in like fall of 2018. And then by winter of 2019, we had delivered the product to that like major stakeholder. So it took us like a little bit over a year to get them their version. And then after that, we tried to take it to like a broader market, but it wasn't like we weren't getting as much traction as we wanted. And so we were considering a pivot. And basically what ended up happening was that there was a co-founder kind of like disagreement on what we should do. And the main guy wanted to pivot into like an enterprise play. Like he wanted to like try to sell this to enterprise companies and build it out, like basically revamp the product, targeting enterprise users and going after enterprise clients. But if you remember, like this started from like the crypto scene, right? Yeah. And so like the rest of the team basically was like, no, like this is a crypto project. Like this wasn't originally meant to be like an enterprise project, and it's not well suited at the moment. Like there's so much other stuff you have to do to get to that level of being like enterprise grade, like services, and so we were not ready for this. And so the rest of the team was kind of like, let's stay a crypto project. Like if we need more money, we should like do another round. We should maybe do like at the time like initial DEX offerings, like IDOs were popular. So we were like, we should just do like an IDO or like an ICO or whatever, or like some sort of like initial token offering. So they wanted to make a token and kind of put that out and go like harder into crypto. But the main guy was like let's get away from crypto. Like I'm like scared of regulations and whatever. And so that has legitimacy. Like that he has valid points. But I think that like going in different directions was not very healthy. And so what ended up happening was that the main guy, who was the more technical guy, he's like the main the guy that came up with the algorithm in the first place. Like he's that guy. And so he ended up going to the VCs and kind of getting them to agree with him. And so the VCs at that point, plus the CEO, was like, let's go enterprise. And so at that point, we're like, all right, good luck. Like we don't really think that's going to work. But yeah, like if you're super committed, like it's possible, right? Anything's possible. And so what ended up happening was he ended up buying the rest of us out. So he like bought our shares out in order to position better. So there's something called a cap table in fundraising. So he wanted to clean up the cap table. And so what that means is like he wanted to organize like who has what percentage so that someone looking to invest in this can be like, oh, like this seems like clean. This seems like organized. Like you don't have like 50% of your shares like owned already. Like, so he wanted to have that look better for the next round. And so he ended up buying us out, and that ended up working out for everyone. So everyone was happy for the most part. Like it's kind of a compromise. Like no one was like super happy, but like everyone was like, I understand, and this makes sense. And I'm content with my deal. So I think everyone was okay.
So everyone kind of respected each other's like belief.
Yeah,
and like
there
why
was a little bit of bad blood between some people, but like not to the point where it was like destructive, right? It was like everyone was like respectful of each other, even though they had strongly different beliefs.
It's not like Social Network.
I actually haven't seen that movie, but
You
like
haven't,
yeah,
no.
but like I know the concept where it's like people are like backstabbing each other and stuff. Like it wasn't
Yeah.
like that, but it was kind of like a little bit of salty, but overall like everyone understood.
Yeah,
so yeah, so that was in 2020, and then I came here, and I've just been hanging.
Yeah, and you were talking about like when you were right now in your startup. So you did a couple other startups, right?
Yeah.
What were those? See, it was mostly about crypto, right?
No.
It wasn't. No.
No. I did a bunch of random stuff.
Like how random?
So remember when I said I moved to California and I did a startup? That was a furniture design and building company. So I designed furniture and built it in a studio in Oakland.
So it's like 7 years ago. I would have been very young. If I came across you, you would be selling me furniture.
I would be showing you cool designs of this weird piece of furniture that I was coming up with. So it was like an idea that I had. It was a concept piece, basically. So that was around the time when standing desks were becoming a thing. And I had used a bunch of like standing desks at the time. And I was like, there could be this thing where it's really hard to explain. You kind of have to like feel it, but there's a way to position your body where you are held upright, but you don't actually have to like put strength in your legs at all. And so it like locks your lower body in place using like a specific design, using like your butt, your knees, and your feet in like opposing angles. So it's really hard to explain without seeing it. But it basically props up the lower half of your body so you're free to like move around. So imagine like sitting on like a stool with like a footrest and like hooking your feet into the thing. So you like the upper body could move totally, but like your lower body weight is like rested and like kind of like held in place. But that kind of design, but like more built out. And more specialized. So the way I was positioning that was basically to try to go after the standing desk market and kind of making this become like the standard like complement to a standing desk. It's like if you have a standing desk, you should have this. And so at the time, it was pretty cool, but then I ended up running into a patent issue where there was a similar enough design from like the 1990s, where I was like, I don't know if I could patent mine cleanly, and so that was when I was like, the steam kind of ran out there.
And when you decided to do that, was that like curiosity or?
I just wanted to try it. I was like, this is a great idea. And it was like such a novel concept at the time. And I was like, this has so much potential. So I just kind of jumped into it without really knowing anything. So I never really did design before. I never did furniture making before, obviously. And so I had to figure all that out. And like, I learned how to do it. So I worked with metal mostly, and so I had to learn how to do like metal work. And so I found a place, and I had a studio that like I could do metal work in, and yeah, it was a lot of fun. So partially it was just fun learning stuff, but this was kind of towards a goal. But the goal wasn't like super serious, like if that makes sense, because like this is just like stuff I want to do anyway with a goal, as opposed to like the goal driving what I was doing.
And has that driven you for the other startups and the 2 million startup?
No, that one was a very specific purpose, and that was someone else's kind of vision, right? Like the main CEO guy had his vision where he wanted to kind of take this. It was actually him and the second guy. So the first guy was the technical brain, and then the second guy was the guy who was like
marketing, right? Like he
not
can
really
talk to
marketing.
anyone.
Yeah.
Or,
So he's more like, we should turn your idea into a company and like into a business, and then we could do this. And so that was kind of them. Then I came into like, so them together were like, we should turn this into a business. It has great potential. How do we do a business? And so that's where I came in. I was like, I know how to run a business. I know how to like do basic like business stuff, like administrate. Like I knew like legally like how to do stuff. Like I knew how to set up the company. I knew how to like make contracts and stuff like that. And so at least like, even if I didn't know exactly, like I was very confident in doing it because like at that point I had a law degree. So I was like, I could figure out the contract. And so, yeah, I think my main value add there was just like getting rid of the doubt that like, can we do this? I came in and was like, yes, we can do this. Like, this is possible. Like, this is all doable. And so I think that was what they needed. And
so you're just kind of like, this is possible. We can do it. We can make it.
Yeah, like if you have an idea and you're like, I wonder if we can do this. And then you're like, well, how do we do that? And then at a certain point, you're kind of like, oh, this seems overwhelming. Like, I don't know if I can do that. I think I was basically the one who was like, don't be overwhelmed. This isn't that hard. Like, you just fill out a form and you submit it.
And that's kind of been how you have been to me. I've been asking like, should I do this? And you're just like, yeah, you can do it all. Like, just focus. Just have priorities.
Yeah, I would say like have priorities is a good thing, and then just like know what you want, like have the goal. Yeah, it's very straightforward. Everything's very straightforward if you define the problem.
So like when we did the hackathon, you were like had a specific criterion for what we want to.
I had many criterias. I don't know if you know that, but like it was like contingent. So it was the first time any of us worked together in any capacity, and I didn't know anyone's skill level. I didn't know what people really wanted, and so it was a process of figuring out what does everyone want to get out of this, and what is possible to do in the amount of time that we have with the amount of people that we have. And so what I ended up deciding was most people here are not here to win the hackathon. Like that wasn't the end goal, because if that was the end goal, I would have pushed you guys super hard to do a lot more. But that wasn't most people's goals. Like most people's goals was to do a hackathon from start to finish and get to submission, and to like go through the process of doing so, and then understand what kind of needs to happen along the way. But basically my criteria was like make sure everyone learns something, make sure everyone kind of advances in some skill set, and then make sure we submit something, and make sure we submit something properly according to the rules that they had. And so that was my baseline goal, and I had multiple other goals if we triggered the other goals, but we kind of didn't because we moved a little bit slow, and that was for various reasons. But like if we had honestly, like if we had done what we built, if we did that in 3 days, I had lots of other goals behind. But we didn't end up doing that for various reasons. There was a little bit of miscommunication between the teams. But I think for the amount of kind of like resources that we had to work with, I think we did okay. And I think everyone learned something. So I think that.
And has that thought process, when did that kind of develop?
Oh, I learned it. So that's a whole thing called product management and project management. These are two different things. Korea doesn't really know the difference between the two. So project management is like once you have a goal and you have the steps to get to the goal, it's like keeping people on track. That's project management. Product management is very different. Product management's goal is to build something that's good, that helps people in some way, and that's like valuable to people enough so that they pay for it. And so that is a very different process where you have to kind of figure out what could be beneficial to people, and then you kind of break that down in different ways. And there's a whole process or multiple processes that you can apply to this. But you basically want to figure out what people like what like so one way to do it is like what is someone's like main problem in life, right? Like what is the biggest issue that they have on like a day-to-day basis? And so once you can define that for that specific person, then you could try to find a solution for that specific person and then decide if that works for them and then decide if you can scale that solution. So that's one way that you can approach like what's called a value proposition definition. And so you want to try to identify a value proposition for your target customer, and there's different ways to do that. But I think that's a very important thing that you should be going after. You hear it all the time, actually. So you hear like product market fit all the time in the startup world, and that's kind of that, where you want to find, so you want to match like what you're building to the demand for what you're building. And so you can move both sides of that. It's like you can change your market. You can target different people or target different like slices within the people you're targeting already. Or you can change your product. Like you can actually like offer other features or pivot entirely and offer a different solution. But I would say a lot of people get very tied. They get like locked into their solution. So like they imagine a solution. It's like, oh, I wonder if I could build a, I don't know, whatever solution. They come up with this idea and they're like, this would be a great idea. And then without really doing the validation of that idea, where they go test if people actually want it or if that would actually solve someone's like problems, they just build it. And they're like, oh, like it was faster for me to just spend a few months building this. And then I can test it for real. But then you've wasted a few months potentially because no one really cares. So you've put in like a lot of effort into like building out this product, this prototype or whatever, and then you've ended up like optimizing parts of it or like making parts better and like putting in more features or whatever. And all of that's useless because like no one cares about that solution. Like fundamentally, no one cares about that solution. Yeah. So that's a very common thing to happen in the startup world.
Then the other thought process you had was just like about being straightforward and just like being honest with yourself and just getting it done and like not being too overwhelmed. That was kind of what I felt from you because you're saying don't be overwhelmed. It's not that hard.
Yeah. I mean, it's not that hard, but it's like it's part of the prioritization process, I think, where it's easy to just do something and then just do it. But like, and that's fine for like short-term things. Like if you can do it in like an hour, like go do it. Like that's probably the most efficient way to test it. But like if this is something that, you know, you have to go find people and then build a team and then raise money and then like take a few months to build out like a prototype, like you could validate that faster. You can like, there are ways to do that better.
It's always just about being very strategic and just getting it done. Not being very strategic, but just getting it done somewhere or some form.
If you don't know what you're doing and you do something and you've gotten that thing done, what are you really accomplishing, right? Like let's say you've built out your idea and you have it and it works. Like even our idea, it's like we have the product, like we have a crappy version of the final product, but then what do we do with it, right? Like you're at a dead end, but that's okay because that was our goal, just to like deliver this thing, and that was the full product definition. But remember how like we spent some time being like, what can we do from here? What are the next steps that are possible from this step? And then we ended up kind of thinking through a couple different versions. It's like, for this market, we can do this. For that market, we could do that. But all of these things would have to be validated in the real world.
That'll require a lot more time and
It's a different skill set. So like, this isn't like coding. This is like going out and talking to people. Like, you have to like go, because we were saying like, oh, like the hackathon project was targeting students who are learning to code. And so we would have to go talk to students who are learning to code to be like, is this helpful? Like, is this something that you would actually use on a regular basis? Or is this just useless? Like, are you just going to go like directly to ChatGPT and like type it in yourself, just copy paste your question, and then like augment your question with some like prompt like modification and stuff? Because that's probably what most people would do, or they just like Google it or whatever. Like, I don't know, depending on whatever they need. Right? It's like, hey, ChatGPT, how do I solve this? Right? And then explain it to me how I solve this. Like, that's an alternative to what we built for the hackathon. But I think that all of those have like strengths and weaknesses. And then all of those have different levels of like, they satisfy the problem to different levels. Right? And so, but they also have different levels of like onboarding friction. So like, if you have to go to ChatGPT yourself, you have to go sign up for ChatGPT, right? Like that's relatively low bar to entry. But for our thing, it's like you have to install a thing, right? Like, you have to go find the thing and install it. That's a different barrier to entry. And so for most people, I think they would prefer just to like go sign up for an account because they're used to that flow, as opposed to like installing Chrome extensions. It's like a little bit less comfortable. People do that less frequently. And so like, you would take into consideration both of those. And it's like, if it's worth it, then they will go do the Chrome extension version. And so, I don't know, we would have to go validate those if we wanted to proceed.
that sounds very interesting. We can talk after. And the other thing you were also talking about was, so it doesn't really matter if you didn't have a goal. So let's say you achieve something, you said, but then if you don't have a goal that doesn't align with it, then that doesn't really. So you need the goal first, right? Like some priority or what you want. Is that
It's
correct?
not so much what you want. It's like, what are you trying to do, right? Like,
Yeah.
what is your objective? Like, let's say you do a startup, right? Like, let's say this podcast. What's your goal for this podcast, right? Like,
Yeah.
like, one, you want to learn how to do a podcast, I'm sure, like, and you want to get better at doing podcasts, and that's a good goal. But is that your main goal? Because if learning how to do a podcast is your goal, there's certain decisions that you would make, like that would let you do certain things better, like maybe diversifying the type of people, maybe diversifying the setting that you do it, learning how microphones work, learning how audio recorders work, learning how editing works. So that's learning how to podcast as the goal. But if your goal is like exposure or to promote something or to become a promotion platform for your guests or whatever your goals are, each of those are slightly different. And each of those are different goals that you would primarily be focusing on. So, for example, if your goal was to promote yourself as a content creator, if that's your main goal, you would be incentivized to bring on guests who will pull more of an audience, for example, as opposed to me, who I probably won't.
I think you'll get more.
I don't know, but like no one really is like tuning in for me, right? Like they might tune in to me and be like, this is interesting, but they're not coming. They're not going to flood your. They're not going to break down your doors to try to get to this podcast. As opposed to like if you got like some super famous person, if you got like BTS here, they would knock down your doors to watch this thing or like listen to this thing. Like they would storm you to get to this, right? And so if your goal was exposure for yourself, that would be the type of people that you would want to try to get. But if your goal is literally, I want to learn how to podcast, then you would do more technical challenges probably, like learn how lighting works, learn how microphones work, because there are things you can optimize, and there are things that would work better to produce a better quality podcast. But yeah, it really depends on what your goals are, and based off of those goals, you would prioritize your choices a little bit differently.
And how did you so what were your like kind of like objective goals when you were like, let's say beginning from like after high school or in high school? Did you think of any objective goals, or what were you like in high school mentally?
High school, I was I had a lot of fun in high school. And then college, I think my main goal was just to meet more people and just to like see what is out there. I wanted to like know more about the world. I think in college that was my main goal. So I did a lot of events. So in college and after college, I did a lot of events. Like we did, I was part of this club in school called like the Asian Student Union at Northeastern, and we basically just got all the Asian kids together and we did stuff that was like either cultural or just like generally fun. So we would do like clubbing stuff, but then we would also like work with like the other clubs and we would do events. And then we would kind of just collaborate with a bunch of people and try to do as many events as we can because people like having options of going to events, especially if we have a budget and we can like pay for stuff.
Mm. And then that was your objective. So in high school was just you just had fun, or you didn't really have it.
Yeah, in high school, I would say I didn't really have a goal because, I mostly just like wasted a bunch of time in high school. I was like playing video games and like just hanging out with my friends, which is fine. And then in college, I was pretty much still doing that, but I was spending a lot more time like doing like social stuff, and so. Yeah, I think that was what I needed at the time because I was kind of a quiet kid. So, like, I enjoyed being around not quiet people. So, it was fun.
So was it like, because I personally, when I was younger, I had social anxiety. Was it social anxiety or was it just like being alone?
No, I feel like I don't know. I feel like I have different priorities a lot of the time where, like, people are trying to do certain things and I'm just like, I don't want to bother with that.
Yeah.
Like people are trying to get drunk all the time or like hook up all the time. And I was like, yeah, like good for you. But like, I'm going to go like read this book. Like I'm going to go like figure out how this thing works. And so we're like, I'm going to go talk to this person because they seem cool. Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah. And on that, so right after college, right? So you got your first job in that and then you talked us through. So throughout that journey, right, what were like some like interesting like experiences, like specific experience that you can tell?
Yeah. It wasn't a clean line. Like it's not like I was like super focused and like I wanted to do this thing since I was a baby. Like it wasn't really that. It was kind of the opposite where I was just kind of like figuring out what's possible. Like I think that was a lot of my time. It's like surveying the many options. So like MBTI wise, I'm like a P type, which is like possibilities type. So instead of like picking one good option and just like going for it, I'm more of like the explore every option a little bit. And then once I've cataloged every option, I now can then like rank them and then choose from the top. And so I think I spent a lot of time just like exploring the world, trying to broaden my horizons a little bit and trying to see more. Because I recognized very early that like my view is very limited and like my view is very colored by my context, right? So like my perspective is built from a certain perspective. I grew up in New York, right? I was from that world. And so I was like, maybe I should just go to California, see how that is. And so I just kind of like picked up and went. And I think a lot of that was very insightful because at the time, like I don't know if you have this where you're from, but like a lot of people who grew up in a small town, they like stay in that small town like forever, right? Like they don't really explore that far outside of the town that they grew up in. And they would never like move or they would never like whatever, like unless they had to. And I saw that happening a little bit and I was like, I want to do the opposite of that. I want to like go to the weirdest places. I want to put myself in the weirdest situations and just see how I do. And so, like for example, like I went to volunteer in India. I was like, what's the weirdest thing that I could possibly do? And so I just kind of picked up and I went it was like a 5-week like program where they kind of like set you up with like a volunteer job and they like kind of take care of your like food and your transportation because like that's the hard part of logistics. So that was super fundamental. Like it was like ground shifting, right? Where like India is very weird. I don't know if you've ever been to India, but like it was the first time where I was like, the things that I thought were like basic are wrong. I was like, the fundamentals that I have assumed that human beings kind of all agree on, these people do not agree on these fundamentals. And so like my brain was like having trouble like adjusting, like that's commonly called like culture shock, but like that, I think that term's a little overused. My brain like couldn't comprehend why they do certain things certain ways. And I was like, why is this happening? Like,
Yeah.
why are they like this? Like, why are
Like
you
what?
like this?
Could you give like an example?
Driving down the road in America, you drive on the right side of the road. In other places, you drive on the left side of the road, right? But that assumes that there are like roads and lines in roads. They did not have roads, and they did not have lines in roads. There was a tree in the center of a highway, and that everyone just swerved around. And then there were cows that crossed the highway, and so everyone would have to like watch out and like stop or like swerve around them and stuff. Like that's like basic stuff. But like, or like, you don't drive through a field when there's a road, like.
Yeah.
But people drove through fields like I don't know. It was like little things like that. It was just like fundamentally like weird to me, and like I couldn't wrap my brain around it when I first got there. But then after a while, I was like, this is normal, and so I got used to it.
Was it was kind of like it kind of taught you like people are like very different?
It kind of taught me that like it taught me to question what I assume is true, like what I assume is true for other people. So like I guess it's like if we took society and reset it fundamentally, what is like the base that we can actually start from? And so like agreeing on certain like social norms, like that's out, right? Language is out. The way we like the importance that we give to certain things is all up in the air. Like religion and stuff, like that's like a societal construct. And so like if we reset society, we would have to like figure out how to handle that at some point. And so I would say like it was really eye-opening to just like go into a very different system. It's like in an operating system, right? Like if you start in like a Windows operating system, you have certain basic fundamentals that every Windows operating system has. And like if you've gone through like multiple Windows operating systems, you're like, okay, there's like this start button and there's this like command prompt or like the command shell or whatever. And then like there's like DOS underneath, right? And so like you could kind of like understand that ecosystem. But then if you go to like Linux, you're like, this is different. Okay, like my commands in the command prompt don't work here. Like I have to use different commands, and like the structures are different, and then what I can do is a little bit different, and the way I have to do it is a little bit different, and then like how that works with the system is a little bit different, and so it's just like that. But then if someone came up with a brand new thing, it's like if you came up with like a quantum computer and they have its own operating system or whatever, those rules are completely different from like conventional computer systems. Even like the differences between these two, like that's a whole new paradigm, right? And so I don't know, like I think more than most people, I'm more comfortable with change and being thrown into like weird situations. And I think I can adapt to it because I have understood what my personal kind of limits are and what I need to be established before I can like function in different situations.
And so you said change. Like I'm personally like more able to change. I'm more not change.
I'm more
but
comfortable being
comfortable.
put in change.
Do you think just people differ and they're just innately born genetically or whatever, just with like I can't do this or I have less of an aptitude?
I don't think that's genetics. I think that's very like societal and like the way that they have been put into different situations. So if me in high school was put into like a weird situation, I don't think I would have done very well. Like I think I would have done okay maybe, but like not as well as I could now after having done weird stuff for a little bit.
So environment over nature.
Experience over nature.
And what do you think about so I was talking to you about my self-limiting beliefs because in high school and in college I meet a lot of people and they're always like I tell them what I aspire to be and they're all like, hey, tone it down a bit, tone it down a bit. You can't do this. You can't do this. How could you do this? What would you say to those people?
I wouldn't say it to those people. Those people can think what they want. I would say it to you, where I would say, so there's two things that I would say. Like, one is like what I think of your goals, but then two is what you should do with your goals. So there's some study somewhere that says if you tell people your goals, you get that hit of like dopamine. And that's the same hit that you would get if you completed your goal. And so that kills the drive to do the goal. So if I say like, hey, like I'm going to go to the gym today and I'm going to work on this and I'm going to do this exercise and I'm going to lift this many weights and this pound, like this many kilos or whatever, that dopamine hit will make it less likely that I actually go to the gym. So it's better for you to not tell people your goals until you are showing them your results.
So only show them the results. Because I do that on Twitter. I never really post what I'm going to do. But with my friends, I got really excited because I tell them what I can do, what I did. And they're like, well, it's cool. I'm like, and we could be this, but I shouldn't be saying that. Or in the researches that you found.
I think there's different ways to use that. So I would say publicly to like the general audience, you should not do that. But you should have people that you're close enough with who you can kind of do that brainstorming with. Yeah, because they'll take it in context, right? They're not going to be like, oh, like you mentioned this idea like last month and you haven't made any progress on that. Like they're not going to do that. They'll be like, yeah, like we're just brainstorming ideas, and that's like the mindset that we're having this conversation in.
And did you yourself like have a community of people who you're?
Yeah, not so much here. I think people in Korea are a little bit. They're not, the startup community in Korea is a little bit weirder, and I think it's a little bit different than the Silicon Valley style that I'm used to. But there are some people who are willing to think through the like kind of brainstorm with. But then I think there's this like tendency towards like extreme tendency towards like safety and like non-failure in Korea. I think failure is very like scary for people in Korea.
Even in the startup scene?
Yeah.
And it was interesting because I was telling you about like the people who are saying these things, like they can do what they want.
Yeah.
And it was a very like, so it seems like you see everything in kind of like a.
I'm very libertarian in the way that like I think maximizing freedom for people to do whatever they want is great. Yeah, like there are very few things that I would say like, oh, like we should just outlaw this outright for everyone, everywhere, all the time, in every situation. So I can always kind of see the argument for letting people do something, and I think that then comes with like with great power comes great responsibility, right? Like you have to like then counteract that with like the proper systems or like the proper like mentality that you would need to have in place in order for that system to work. So like, for example, like people were talking about like universal basic income for a while, and they're starting to talk about that again with like AI kind of taking all everyone's jobs. But like if you gave everyone a certain amount of money, that comes with certain expectations, right? So people kind of take that expectation goal of like, let's build a new economy ecosystem where everyone has like a base amount of money. Like that sounds like it could solve the problem, but that maybe doesn't work unless you have certain other steps in place to get to that final kind of like utopian goal or whatever. And so I think the systems in place are very important, but also like you have to understand how people act and what people think, right? So like how would someone feel getting basic income, and how would that affect someone from their desire to do certain things? Because that's a very big spectrum. Like you have people who like would just coast, and you have people who would like work harder, right? And so like you have to understand how most people would handle certain things, and you would have to plan for that.
And then how were such views? So how did you come up with those views? Like, what were there any like books that were pivotal, or this is just your environment and your parents and like college? Or what would you say was an important factor?
I can't remember exact books, but like I go through a lot of books. Like I would say I go through like, I don't know, like probably like 50 books a year. Yeah.
And is there any like, not exact, I mean, you can say exact, but like kind of just some noteworthy ones that you can come up with right now?
It depends. Because like a lot of people, I would say you need to go after the topics that seem interesting to you at the time. Otherwise, they're just going to sit. Like it's just going to sit in your library, in your like, I should read this pile. And it doesn't really impact you. Like you have to find something that like kind of like calls to you. You're like, this would be helpful for me because of this reason. And if I just get through this book, I will have a better handle on this topic. And I think just exploring what topics are available is a good enough place for people. Because like if you want a book on a certain topic, like you can find that. Like it's not hard. But it's like, yeah, and like thinking through different like things to learn is probably where I would suggest someone start. Like just know what you could learn. Like what we talked about this earlier. It's like product management versus project management. That's pretty cool. But like it's very different. And the fact that people don't know product management here, I would maybe recommend people learn some product management because it's very like critical. And I've seen it missing in a lot of places in Korea at least. So maybe something there.
And after like, so I think we've kind of come to like where you're at currently. So what's your like, so two things. First, I'm very interested in AI. So what's your current opinions on AI and what experiences have you had with AI that you could share?
Yeah. So I think AI is great for like, I don't know exactly how to like phrase this, but like massive scale, massive output, like massive, like different outputs of analyzing massive amounts of data. So like if you have like a ton of data and you want to do a ton of things with that data in different ways and different outputs, and you have to process the data in different ways for each of these many outputs, then you can apply AI in a procedural form to get to all of these like intermediary steps off of the raw data. So I would say like in order to like have a widespread amount of output based on like a database, like a base layer of data, like a data set.
And how do you think it'll shift like society in the future?
Yeah, so right now, I mean, large language models are a thing, and like stable diffusion stuff is like a thing. But I think at a certain point, like all of these, so right now we're in like the diverging phase where everything's kind of like we're exploring what's possible. And then there's going to be a converging phase where people kind of end up being like, this is what's possible, and kind of coming back into like, these are the good things that we should focus on. And so once it starts to converge again, it'll be easier to integrate all of those things together. So like basically if there's like a way that we kind of diverge and explore like every possible way to apply AI, and then certain ones kind of get a lot of traction and get a lot of like people interested in using it, and it solves real problems for them, like those will kind of last and get worked on and get optimized and get refined. I think those will then, like, let's say there's like 10 of those left, then you can kind of start to integrate those 10 together to give you like new systems. So I would say basically like if we try everything and then like certain things work, we can then like turn all the things that work into like singular products.
But you don't think it's going to be like, because a lot of people are scared, like doomsday, like it's going to change? Meh.
Yeah. Like I think we'll adapt. Like people will adapt. Or like society will adapt.
And how would you say, so like college students or like high schoolers, how do you think we can, just like someone beginning a business, how they could use AI and take advantage of it?
Yeah, I would say don't worry so much about the specifics. Just like understand like fundamentals of what's happening. Like I don't mean like understand fundamental tech of like how things are working, but kind of like what you're doing. So like the way that like an older programmer would apply AI in coding is a little bit different to how I see even you apply AI in coding. you ask every question to AI, where you're just like, I wonder how this works. Then you'll just ask AI like
Yeah.
automatically.
But you saw me doing it?
Yeah, like you
Oh.
do that all the time, where you're just like, hey, like, how do I change this? And then you're like, how do I change this? And it gives you the answer, and you're like, all right, like let me just blindly copy paste and see if it works. Yeah. Oh, great, it worked. Like I don't have to think anymore, and that's good. But then like, you'll try something else, and it just won't work, and you're like, I have no idea why this isn't working, or like what's wrong with it. And so that's when like more fundamentals would come in place, where you could then break down what it told you and kind of like figure out where it's wrong or where you didn't communicate well enough to it or whatever. And so I think there is like a place for just blindly using AI, but then there is a lot of places, especially now where it's early on, where you then need to then understand fundamentally what it's doing or like how it's telling you certain things. Because like I know this is a problem that's like a known problem, but it tells you things that are wrong all the time. Like it's just like just not true.
Like hallucinations, I think it's called. Yeah.
So like someone, I was in a group chat on like something crypto related, and they were like, "Oh, like this is what like ChatGPT told me about this topic," and I was like, "That is wrong. Like that is like actually wrong." And then he's like, "Why?" And I was like, "I see why this is difficult to explain, because I would then have to like explain like an entire topic to you to then show you why it's wrong." And to him, he was just happier just assuming it's correct, because he had no base, like he had no fundamental understanding on a topic. So he just asked ChatGPT, and then he's taking that as true, where I know that it's false. Like, and so that's kind of dangerous, where if he uses that as like a foundational building block for himself, like mentally building block, and he builds off of that as true, like there will be a time when like that's important, and he's like, well, no, you can do this, and you would be wrong at that point. Or like, this is possible, and you're like, no, that's not possible. That's not how this works.
So some things can be too complicated, and because you didn't have a fundamental knowledge from the beginning, you can't understand it. Or if someone tries to explain, you just don't have the understanding.
Yeah, so it'd be like if you didn't know the concept of colors, and I showed you this, which is green. Like we can agree it's green. And I was like, this is purple. If from the beginning I always said this is purple, and you're just like, cool, I don't know what that is, so great, that's purple, I don't care. And then you build your fundamentals on this is purple, and then at a certain point you need to identify something similar to this, like you would be wrong.
Interesting. So you have a very unique, not very, I guess because other people on one event, everyone was saying it's gonna, because you think it'll still change the world a lot, right?
So you have to think about the context of what people are talking about, right? So people are news articles and things that are targeting mass media or like general population. They want simple solutions for simple problems that they can then talk about in a relatively simple manner. And that is to cover a lot of people in a lot of situations generally. And mass media does that pretty well. Like people are freaked out about jobs, and so they're gonna write an article about jobs, right? And like AI taking your jobs or whatever. And like, what can you do to protect your jobs from AI? Or like, what can you do to like whatever, right? Like prepare yourself for the AI revolution or whatever. Like catches attention, right? But like at the end of the day, like how. I don't know. Like, I don't think people are really that affected at the moment. It's more just like the fear of being affected more than actually being affected. And there are people that have been affected, but like they can also figure out another thing to do, right? Like, it's like saying like, oh, like internet's gonna kill newspapers. Like, yeah, it's true. But there are still newspapers. But there are. Like society has changed to the point where newspapers are not really needed anymore. Like, what is the core function of a newspaper? It's like to get you news. Now we have that still. Like we still get news all the time, and arguably much better and arguably much faster and about more topics, right? News is better now than it was with newspapers.
Yeah. And in terms of like just telling to a larger audience. And on that point, so AI and stuff, the second question I want to ask was, so what's your kind of like, I think I asked you before, and It's like, what's your like long term vision, or just future goals you have in mind?
For AI or for
No,
like myself?
just yeah, yourself.
I don't know. So I feel like I'm in a weird place where I should be working on stuff, but like I don't really feel like the pull to be working on anything specific. So and this happens a lot. And so like in these times what I end up doing is learning. So I learn a lot about whatever interests me. So like right now I'm learning a lot about web development still in different areas. I'm learning a lot about AI stuff just because I'm hanging out with Tomo a little bit, and like we're talking about it. Like he's like the AI expert. Yeah. So like in order to like talk at his level, I'm trying to like get fundamentals. Like so I'm learning like TensorFlow and like a bunch of other stuff, just to be able to have more like higher level conversations with people. And plus, it's like a trendy topic, so it's better to know it than to not know it. But I think for myself, like I think fundamentally learning how things work is important for me and the way that I function. And so like that's why like in the cryptocurrency world, I was pretty confident on like cryptography, right? And so I'm not like an expert in cryptography by any means, but like I know the basics and I know how it works. And so in order to kind of have conversations about like what is like zero knowledge or like what is like a roll up or whatever, like in the crypto world, there are these like new kind of like cutting edge technologies that people are hyped about, but like they don't know what that is. They don't understand what it can be used for besides like fundamentally it's like, oh, it's scaling, or like, oh, like better throughput or whatever, like or privacy or whatever. Like a lot of people know it at that level, whereas like if you study it a little bit, you can know it at like a deeper level. Like you know what that means, you know what scalability means, you know what privacy means, and like the limits of it. And so I would say in AI too, it's like people are like, AI is going to take over everything, but like which AI, right? Like what model, like what application of this are you talking about, and what are the limitations of that? What are the limitations of like a large language model like ChatGPT? Like what are the how does it work, right? Like most people probably still don't even know. It's like you predict the next word in a sequence. It's like your phone's autocomplete where you like start typing something and it gives you suggestions, but just much better, right? Yeah. And so, but like people don't know that. People think it's just like magic, right? And so they're just scared of magic because they're like, oh, you're a witch, you're a sorcerer, and so like I think if more people understood what is possible and what the limitations are, they'd be less freaked out about it, and they would then be in a better position to do something.
So, if I'm correct, your future goals are kind of
Learning.
just learning, just for now.
Learning until so I have this like personal philosophy where it's like if I should be doing something, I'll be doing it. Like if I should be working in AI, I'll be working in AI. Like if I should be learning how to, I don't know, like shoot video, like I'll be doing that. Like there are so many things in the world that's possible to be doing that I think if my interest is drawn to a thing, it's probably for a good reason. And it may or may not be super relevant, but I will enjoy the process of going through that. Like lately, like I picked up frisbeeing, like so I haven't frisbeed since like high school. Yeah, so I bought a frisbee
Since high school. Oh,
yeah. So I bought a frisbee and I went to the park with a friend and we started throwing the frisbee around. And so like that's a random ass thing, right? Like it's so random, but I think it's cool. Like and like there are some benefits to doing it. It's basically like having a ball you can throw without the equipment. You just need like a frisbee. And so you can just like run around with people. And then there's like a thing called ultimate frisbee. And ultimate frisbee is basically like a game. It's kind of like soccer with frisbee. So like once you catch the frisbee, you can't step. You have to like stand in place.
Oh yeah, I think I played that
and then
one.
You like throw it, and then like you can run, and then you can catch it, and then like try to get it in like the end zone.
Yeah, I like the ones where you throw it and then the dog runs up. It's really cute. Just gets it. Yeah. I have a baby sister, so I just like, no, it's really, I just throw a ball and she just gets it. It's pretty funny.
Nice. Maybe you can get her a little frisbee, like a little soft one.
I should. Yeah. But yeah, on that, so the future goals are just
Learning.
learning, and on AI.
Learning and keeping it open. So like once I'm pulled to something, like it's very easy for me to like act. So like the hackathon, it was like very like out of nowhere, right? It was like, who wants to do a hackathon? I was like, sure. And then like we kind of jump in and we do it, we get it done, and then we move on, right? So and I think that had some benefits. Like I wouldn't be here if we didn't do that. And so I think we do keep yourself open to the opportunities that present themselves, but also get ready and prepare yourself to be able to capitalize on more opportunities. And I think that is learning for me so that I'm aware of what these opportunities are.
Yeah, that's a lot of everything you say it makes so much. It's like a very like it's easy to understand. It follows a very so it's just great listening to you. It's like listening to audiobook. An audiobook each like minute they spend an hour, and it's like as if all your words are curated. But on that, so I like to end off the podcast with just like 3 statements of advice. You don't really have to explain it much. Just like 3 statements, or it doesn't have to be advice if you don't like advices. Just about people who are 16 to 26, just beginning life.
Okay, so the best piece of advice that I heard that I then repeated to a bunch of other people who also said it was really good advice. When I got to college, so it was like a new town, like a new city, new environment. I had no idea what was happening because I didn't like watch movies or anything, so I just had no idea what was happening. The first week of college, someone was like, "You should just like regardless of your personality, you should just go introduce yourself to everybody that you meet because like most of those people you'll never talk to again, but like maybe you'll meet someone cool." And so my first week of college, I'm pretty introverted normally, but like I just forced myself to go like talk to everybody, like random people, like in random groups that I would never have approached otherwise, like the super cute girl, like the like this creepy looking dude. Like I would just talk to everybody and just be like super like outgoing for the first week. And I was like, for 1 week, like I can do it. Like for like a couple days, I can do it. And so I just forced myself to do that, and that opened so many doors where I was just like invited to more stuff. Like I knew about more stuff, and people would be like, "Yeah, like no one knows anyone. Like this is cool. Maybe we'll talk again. Like maybe not." And so like I didn't talk to most of those people again ever, but like some people who I never would have talked to, I ended up talking to, and that worked out pretty good. So that's one piece of advice. Like if you're thrown in a new situation, no one knows who you are. No one's going to remember you. Don't worry too much about it. Just like be outgoing. Force yourself to be outgoing. Some people might be like a dick about it where they're like, fuck off. But like
Yeah.
most people won't do that.
And do you have like 2 or do you just think that one thing just is just
So
wow.
that's one. I would say kind of related to the end of that. There's like this like rejection, kind of like aversion to rejection. No one likes being rejected. It kind of sucks. But like after a while, it starts to suck less. And so I would say that's not a bad thing to practice. Just like go get rejected a bunch. Yeah. Everyone has a problem. Like no one's like perfect at getting rejected. But like after a while, like it's less like world ending. It's more just like, meh, that sucked. But like, or like after a while, you're just like, well, her loss or like whatever. So I would say that's a good skill to have. That's kind of related to the first one, I guess, but like it's a
Yeah.
little different.
So it's like the consequences that might happen and just
Yeah,
take them.
it's usually not that bad. Like no one
Yeah.
cares as like no one outside of you cares as much about what's happening to
Yeah.
you.
And what's your third one then?
I don't know. There's a lot. Ask me a more specific question.
Okay, the third one will be specifically to me. So currently, I'm 16. I'm trying to focus on AI, right? Okay, let me give a problem or something I have. I've been kind of because I don't really make any money, so I've been kind of like,
Oh, you're 16.
yeah,
That's
I
kinda
know,
normal.
but it's
Yeah.
like everyone else is like, yeah, I tell them, I tell them the results, and they're still like, you didn't make any money, and I'm like, and then they, I think I told you, they just look at you like like, who is this guy? And then one of them, I thought he was a cool guy. I was close to him, but he kept looking at me in like a negative tone, and I just didn't. I just got because he was close, and I just got sad. And then some people just were close, just trying to not just go away
Yeah.
or just
Let me give a little bit of context. You haven't really asked a question yet, but the context is like there's different people that are at different levels. So you mentioned like, oh, they were close. You mentioned that a couple times, but close has different meanings for different people. So there's close in like family close, and like those are the people that are like stick with you even if you like murder someone. They're like gonna like have your back, right? But then there's other people who are like not gonna do that much for you, but like who will have your back for most things. But then there are people who will have your back in good times, right? And then there are people who will have your back in very specific situations. And so like it's a matter of like learning where people are, like which group are they? Like are these people like just like business acquaintances, which is like very low, I would say, like just like people I've met during business, which is super low. Like you can't really rely on them to kind of be your like emotional support base. Like those are the people that you can like ask for favors in certain situations, and they'll like help you out if it's not that much trouble. But then there's like other people who you can rely on a little bit more, and who will give you like more like advice, like more like meaningful advice on like a broader level than just like business, right? Because like there's like business advice, and there's like advisors literally, and their job is to like make sure you optimize for profit or whatever, right? And so, and that's great, like, and those are super valuable sometimes. But I think at this stage, that's not what you're going after. What you want is like life advice, right? And like kind of like direction.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, business people won't give you that.
So just classifying people.
Not so much, but just like recognize that there are different classifications, and like not everyone who is like nice to you is like you're like gonna be like your dad, you know? Like
Yeah.
like that's like obvious if someone says it to you, but like there's like it's a little bit different because like in school there's like people that you can rely on, like your friends and stuff, right? But then there's like people you would trust to do certain things, but they're not really your friends, and like I don't know, like even friends like is a little bit vague. Like after a while, there's like different tiers of friends.
And that's kind of connected to the second advice, which is about just getting used to getting rejected, or just people not being like nice.
Sure. I mean, yeah, like I would say, yeah, after a while. So this is a little bit weird, but like, and like this is just my upbringing and might not be true right now, but like I think for guys, it's more like there's this like tendency to expect self-sufficiency. So it's like you should be able to be self-sufficient. And so like if you're not like me, like I'm kind of putting words in that person's mouth, but it's like if you're not making money, you are not self-sufficient. So as a business, you are not self-sufficient. So you are not doing your job, kind of, right? And that kind of makes sense in a business context, where if there's a company that's like not making money, and they're not really getting product market fit, and they're not really getting traction on their product, but they're like working hard on their product, no one cares, right? Like it's not a very like kind place for companies, right? Like if your product sucks and no one wants it, and you're wasting time building something no one wants, there's like not much like empathy there for people. It's kind of just like do better business, like get better at business, and then maybe people will buy it, and then you'll make some money. But until you do that, like your company sucks, right? Like that's very like harsh, but that's the context in which most businesses live. And so like you might have friends who would be like supportive and being like, oh yeah, like I'll buy one or whatever it is. But, like that's not enough to like build a company off of. And like maybe you can get some feedback off of that person that bought one like as a friend, but you have to like know the limitations of like what you're trying to ask people. Yeah, and like I would say the more value that people usually have to give, the less they like have time to give it. Like I had this weird like interaction. So like in college, there was like this book signing where we had a speaker come in, and it was like a big like CEO of like a major like Fortune 100 company, and like he did like a book signing afterwards, and so like people like lined up to like get their book signed at this guy who's just like sitting at a table with like his like I guess like bodyguards or like administrators or whatever standing beside him, and then like so when you go up, you only have like 5 seconds of like interaction time, and then so like most people are just like, oh, I super respect you or whatever, and like thank you for coming or whatever, or like, oh, like you're such an inspiration. Like people like use that time to say that stuff, and I was like, I literally went up and I was like, can I have a follow up like 15 minutes with you anytime this week or like while you're here? He was like, no, and I was like. I was not expecting like a straight up no. I thought he'd be like a little bit nicer about it. He was just like no, and I was like, oh, okay, thanks, bye. And so like at that point, like to him, there's no benefit to him talking to me, right? And like that made sense to me. Like once I like sat down and thought about it, but like in that moment, I was just like, what? What do you mean no? Because I was so used to like people like being nice about stuff, right? And like if I asked anyone in high school, it's like, hey, like, can I get 15 minutes of your time to like ask you some stuff about the stuff that you're super into? Most people wouldn't just be like, no, fuck off, right? Like, but it makes sense as the CEO of a super important whatever that he would not do that, right? And like, yeah, so it was okay. Like I learned something in that interaction. Not saying that's good. I'm just saying like it's like understandable.
Yeah, and you learned, and it's just learning.
Because like if he said yes to me, and like I had no context, I didn't like even tell him what I was gonna talk to him about or whatever. Like I could have pitched that better. I could have made it more like I could have highlighted the value better. It's like, hey, I want to do this for this reason in this way. Could I set up a time with you through an assistant just to get 15 minutes of your time? Anytime by phone, right? So like I think because it was like in person, I think he was like he didn't have like a schedule open, right? He didn't have like his assistant with him to look at his calendar or whatever. So I think that factored into it. So if I had taken that into consideration and I really wanted to talk to him about something, I could have set it up in a different way. I could have optimized that interaction better.
Sure. Yeah. Well, thank you very much.
Sure.
Samuel Suh. Is that right? Samuel Suh. I'm trying to learn. Yeah. Samuel Suh. Thank you very much. This is, done. Yeah.
LM Podcast.
Yeah, LM Podcast. Thank you.
Cool.
Thank you very much.
Sure.